Hey guys, welcome back to the channel. Today I am joined by John and Thomas from Catholic Answers. Why don't you guys introduce yourself? We'll start with you, John.
My name's John, and I am the Chief Operating Officer at Catholic Answers.
And I'm Thomas, and I run the social media.
I met John and Tom at the Catholic Creator Conference in Steubenville. Is that the official name of it?
Yeah, that's what they're calling it, I think. Yeah.
Okay, I want to make sure. Kyle, if you're here, just tell me why I'm wrong and stupid and correct me in the comments. It was interesting seeing more metalhead Catholics than what I was anticipating. So I thought it would make an interesting topic of conversation, especially since we were chatting with a few other non-metalhead Catholics while we were there. Just a heads up to everyone, even though these guys work for Catholic Answers, this is not like an official church stance. This is just three Catholic metalheads talking about their perspective on this subject. So let's start with when did you become Catholic? Let's I don't know, who wants to start that?
I can start.
Yeah.
I've been Catholic I was born and baptized as an infant into a Catholic family, but they all left when I was probably very young, like 12 or 13, and I was an atheist for the next 20 years. So technically I've been a confirmed Catholic for about 20 years now.
I was normal cradle Catholic. My whole family is still in the faith and everything. But you know, like most cradle Catholics, I didn't actually start taking my faith seriously until later, and that started about high school, and you know, continued through high school and college was when I really started to seriously try to live a Catholic life. And coincidentally, that's like when that pretty much maps neatly onto when I started listening to metal too.
I was a cradle Catholic until around college. After college, I kind of pitter-pattered out and then became like roughly agnostic, but still basically believed that God existed. And then I reconverted to Catholicism very hard in August. When did you start listening to metal music?
Oh gosh, do I get to go first?
Yeah.
I'm going to date myself right now, but I think I've been listening to metal music probably longer than the two of you guys have been alive.
Combined?
Not combined. Yeah, maybe combined. Oh, Lord, take me now. So I think a friend of mine had given me a tape cassette of Slayer when I was in, I think, 8th or 9th grade. And I've been listening since then. I don't remember what year that is, 86, 88, yeah, around 1986. So a long time.
Okay, word. How about you, Tom?
Gosh, not to make you feel even older, John, but like I remember the year. I remember very distinctly. It was freshman year of high school, so that would have been 2011. Walking through the parking lot, hearing Master of Puppets on the radio for the first time, and it wasn't like a light bulb, like I'm a metalhead right away moment, but like that was the song that stuck with me, and it just things slowly progressed from there.
For me, I think the predisposition was when I was growing up as a tiny little toddler, and they had the X-Men animated series on TV and the Power Rangers theme song.
Nice.
That music was so dope. But then it wasn't until my brother introduced me to like Metallica, Rammstein, Godsmack when he got his license and driving to and from school or to other random places, and we were driving way too fast. It was the best. It was badass. Loved it.
Yeah, there's no other way to drive when you're listening to metal, man.
Exactly. Yeah, especially when you're a teenage boy.
Yeah.
So, what does metal mean to you? Because I think there can be a lot of different ways of interpreting it. But what does it mean to you guys, like individually?
Oh, do I get to go first?
Let's just do that for simplicity.
I like really hard music. Metal in particular is something that is just, it's sort of an aggressive sound. It's something that, I'm not taking life advice from metal musicians, but, I have a long commute. And, when I have to drive to work in the morning, I typically, I've got a cup of coffee that's like a barrel with a handle on it, and I listen to metal, and that usually wakes me up, and then I come to work, and I work for Jesus all day. And that's kind of how it works for me. Before that, it was something of a movement. When I was younger, metal tended to like attract the sort of disaffected kids that maybe didn't really fit in anywhere else, and that definitely was the case for me. I didn't always fit in a lot of places, and when I met these other guys that were into metal, there was that common bond.
How about you, Thomas?
Just musically, it means to me just aggressive, loud, guitar-driven distortion, and I know that's not a perfect, definition of metal. There's a lot of non-metal that falls under there, but at some point you just got to go like, I know it when I hear it. And if you want to do the like, well, it descends from Black Sabbath thing, sure, whatever. That's not really what I'm thinking about. But yeah, that's what it means. It's music that's aggressive and energetic for the most part, and I just get a kick out of it.
Being a metalhead definitely comes with a certain level of irreverence, a certain level of anger. It's definitely been tainted with a whole lot of Satanism throughout its existence. Yeah. How do you square being a metalhead with being a Catholic, or just a Christian in general?
I typically don't listen to the lyrics in music, and I don't know if the three of us would agree on this, but for me, metal is all about the riff. It's all about the guitar riff. That's really why I listen to heavy metal music. It's that part. And they typically...
And all of the autists in my comment section are agreeing with you. It's about the riff, dude.
Yeah, totally. I mean, that's really it. So I never have paid that much attention to the lyrics because, I mean, if we're being honest, most of the bands that I listen to, even after, 30 years of listening to the album, I still can't understand half of what they say. And I don't really care because that's not why I'm listening to it.
Totally, yeah, I absolutely relate to that. How about you, Thomas?
It's mostly the same, like we know what we're here for when we listen to music most of the time, and it's for the music, not the poetry that is lyrics, I think that can vary from genre to genre. There's some genres of music that are definitely more like, I don't know, lyrically heavy, rap, R&B, pop to an extent. But really what we're mostly there for is the melody, the harmony, the beat and everything. So knowing that like that's why I'm listening in the first place has made it not too difficult for me to reconcile my listening habits with my beliefs. I think for the most part, riffs are, I don't even think for the most part, just riffs are morally neutral, right? That's kind of the way I've always seen it.
Except for that middle breakdown part in Angel of Death from Slayer.
That's pure evil. Right?
I heard that, and it made me want to learn how to play guitar. I wasn't thinking about what the song was about. I just heard that riff, and I was like, whoa.
Yeah. But it's also a good point about how, like, I don't know, half the time you can't understand what they're saying anyway. One of my favorite black metal bands is from Iceland, and like all their lyrics, titles, album names, everything like are in a language I cannot comprehend. So as far as I'm concerned, the vocals are just doing their thing, but I'm here for like the riffs and the melodies and everything. And that's certainly the case with extreme music. It's less the case with, as you get in the more, early traditional metal scene. But even if I can understand what they're saying, most of the time, I still know that that's not what I'm there for.
I think that was the Aquinas point that you were bringing up before, because it wasn't just the message going out, but the disposition of the person receiving it as well. That was equally as important. Was that what it was?
I mean, what he says is like what is received is received according to the mode of the receiver, and basically what that means is like depending on how you're disposed, you're going to receive things in different ways. And so, someone who's, I guess, disposed to agree with a certain subject matter of a song is probably going to receive that subject matter, more favorably than someone who's not and like just wants to ignore it.
So I think this leads very seamlessly into the next question, this big block of text that I sent to you guys. Mm-hmm. But Greek philosophy and the doctors of the church like Aquinas and Augustine shape much of Catholic and Christian culture. So I'd love to know your thoughts on Plato and St. Augustine, which is Plato believed that music could directly touch the soul, which he referred to as self, influencing the character of a person while bypassing their reason. Quote, because more than anything else, rhythm and harmony find their way into the inmost soul and take strongest hold upon it. He believed music had the power to shape the character. Therefore, he claimed that there could be right kinds of music and wrong kinds of music, like music that's good for you to consume and music that's bad for you to consume. And this is outside of the lyrical context. In the 4th and 5th centuries, many prominent thinkers, just like St. Augustine, believed that music affected the soul and thus could influence or determine the ethics, actions or morals of the individuals. So, I think because of this kind of philosophy on music, this is why you see the latching onto of ancient chant styles in multiple different Christian rites, and a lot of that having to do with pulling way back, making it peaceful, helping it elevate the mind and things like that. So in that sense, I've heard the argument, and I don't agree with this, but I've heard the argument that metal is inherently anti-God because it pulls you away from God and pulls you into self. So like how would you square that position? Like, or how would you even counter that point of view?
There's a lot there to agree with. I'm not going to disagree with it totally, but I would say that just looking at my own life, I've been a heavy metal fan since I was a little kid, but I've been actually coming up in a few months. I've been at Catholic Answer 17 years, and I spend 8 hours every single day working for Jesus. Most of my life is centered around Catholicism and going to church or doing things for my parish or things like that. But and so in comparison, I spend very little time these days listening to music. But metal does not, like, for example, when I hear Ozzy Osbourne or something, I'm not taking life advice from Ozzy Osbourne, because all you have to do is just look at his life and say, well, he made a lot of money, but he also had a lot of terrible things happen. And so, and besides that, I mean, I'm looking for moral direction from my church. And really that's it. I'm not interested in taking life advice from metal musicians. And not that they don't sometimes have things to say. I think you can, like, for example, when I remember when Spiritual Healing from Death came out, and it's got this picture of, the crazy guy, the crazy preacher.
The evangelist preacher.
Yeah, and the money and all that stuff. And, and that was at a time when, the televangelists were getting busted and all these scandals and everything. And, I think maybe at some point, probably that music can help to maybe reflect a little bit on ourselves, on, problems in the Christian churches. I mean, it's not specifically Catholic what he's talking about, but yeah, I don't think there's a one size fits all. It's like, that principle seems to me like the check engine light. If there's something coming between you and God, absolutely get rid of it. But metal music has not affected me in that way. Nowadays, like when I hear, like I used to think Slayer was really smart, but now that I know Christian theology a lot better and I listen to their lyrics, I'm like, wow, these guys are incredibly stupid in some of their. Yeah. I mean, like it's just they don't strike me as really knowing Christianity all that well. So I feel like there's a little bit of a deficiency there too.
Which, like, Slayer is an interesting band to pick out, but I want to come back to that a little later. I guess, like, the question I would throw back at you is, do you think that the sound of metal music influences your behavior or your thoughts or your emotions?
I think it can, of course.
Okay.
But I would soften, the premise from Plato that he seems to be saying it does, like, infallibly. It will always affect you in this way to this particular degree. I would need to see, his actual quote in the context again. But
that's fair.
Fair. Like, if you're taking it that way, I don't think I would agree. It's people talk about music like it's a drug, but it's not a drug. It's not chemically altering yourself. It's not chemically altering your brain to act in a certain way.
I think I might actually disagree with that somewhat, but we can come back to that too. We can come back to that later.
But
your train
maybe
of thought.
I'd pull back on that. But I think we can at least agree not to the degree that, like, street drugs do, and certainly not to, like, a mind controlling degree, which is like the lengths to which you could maybe take that Plato quote. I don't know if you would. But the point is, like, yeah, it does influence you sometimes, some ways. And even then, I don't know if that's necessarily a bad thing, as long as, like, what it disposes you to do is then rightly ordered. So if metal music makes you angry or hypes you up or whatever, then at that point, well, people listen to it athletes listen to it to get hyped up for what they're about to do, to go out and go to war, basically, right? So that's a healthy way to order that. And anger does serve a purpose, to correct injustice. Anger serves a purpose in my spiritual life when, I battle vices all the time. And sometimes I'm really angry that, I just can't beat this one and I fell into this sin again. And so anger can spur you on to like really go to war against your vices, right? So,
yeah.
And
righteous anger is biblical.
Right, precisely. It's, anger itself is volatile and you got to harness it. But that point being that like, just because, a certain musical sound can dispose you towards dispose you towards one passion or another, if you have enough control of yourself, of your interior life, to make sure that you dispose that, I keep using that word, to make sure that you direct yourself in either a good or at least morally neutral way, then I think that's okay. But that requires a lot of self-knowledge, a lot of discipline, a lot of real honesty with yourself. And it can be risky for, the disaffected youths that John mentioned. It can be risky for someone who's disaffected or highly impressionable to, feel that way all the time. I'm not going to say like it would never affect anyone badly in any way. And even then, like, I have to make sure I'm not carving out a special exception for myself. Like, well, it could be bad for that person, but, in my special circumstance, I'm fine. Again, it just takes a lot of honesty and self-reflection, which is literally like the Christian life. You're always supposed to, like John's check engine light, you're always supposed to like be looking out for that and then see like, how is everything I'm taking in from the world affecting me?
Yeah. If your right eye causes you to sin, pluck it out. Jesus isn't telling us to actually pluck our eyes out. He's saying if there's something, that gets in between you and your relationship with God, then you should change it. And so if music, any kind of music, has that effect on the person receiving it, then they should cut it out.
And I also think that like you brought up chant earlier, Mike. That's a really good point to bring up as well, because chant, I think, it's meant to dispose you to worship, and that's the purpose of chant. So for that reason, I think you could say something like metal does not belong in the context that chant was made for. Chant belongs in the liturgy, it belongs in the mass, it belongs in adoration and everything. I can pretty comfortably say nothing sounding like metal should belong in those contexts, because it does not dispose you to worship. It just doesn't.
It makes me very happy to hear that, and also there are several friends and acquaintances who are probably not liking that statement right now.
I'm sorry.
It's okay. I'm personally with you on that. I don't think it does dispose you to worship, but I've heard some metal songs by some Christian bands where I can see how it gets close, because they adopt some of the similarities you see in CCM, but in a metal timbre, if that makes any sense.
Sure. Or even from more traditional kinds of chants and stuff.
Honestly, though, if we're being honest, just real quick, I don't think that the Peter, Paul, and Mary style guitar songs fit very well with worship either.
Yeah,
that we get in a lot of our parishes. Right? There's a certain
John.
Yeah, let's make that clear real quick.
Yeah. Like I don't like that kind of music at Mass either.
I would be nearly as upset with Hillsong at Mass as I would with metal.
Yeah. That's okay. Yeah. That sounds like a different video topic that I would love to discuss. But as far as Plato goes, and I would even argue Aquinas, a lot of the context that gets lost is like because of how far we've come in culture, in science, and in thought as far as organizing things. We just like shove them strictly into a philosophical corner, when kind of philosophy and science were basically kind of the same thing.
Yeah.
Back that long ago.
Yeah.
And Plato's like self and influencing the soul and everything, they didn't have the differentiation of knowing like, okay, there's reason and then there's emotions. The emotions and the soul were kind of the same thing to them, but not exactly. I don't know. But like they didn't differentiate between those two. So like I think it's very clear and demonstrable that music immediately impacts your emotions. And I would also say, as far as I'm aware, theologically, we as Catholics believe that emotions do affect the soul, and those things are two separate things. I don't want to say entities, but things. They're two separate nouns.
They're really closely connected to one another, but you can distinguish between them. Yeah,
That's probably the part that I take away from Plato that's correct, and how that emotional response affects the soul is going to depend upon, like we were talking about earlier, how the disposition of the person receiving it. So I think I agree with you in that sense, Thomas, where I think in some cases it could be poor, and in other cases I think it could actually be incredibly therapeutic.
Yes.
I kind of think of music like natural drugs, in a sense. When I say natural drugs, I mean like stuff that you can pull out of the earth and it'll have a profound chemical impact on you. You can apply that kind of drug or plant or whatever, and it can work as a medicine, but if you apply it wrong or if you apply too much, it can work as a poison.
Yeah.
Does that make sense?
yeah, that does.
Yeah, I agree with that.
Yeah, but that's also true of just about anything that's morally neutral. I mean, one of the principles of Catholic life is moderation in all things. So you can OD on just about anything that's okay to consume, pretty much. So it's not unique to metal or music in general.
Can I add just one thing to that?
Sure.
There is a line at which I won't cross. So I don't really like. I hate black metal. It sounds like somebody's vacuuming up marbles to me. But that's just what it sounds like to me. It's not. That's a genre that never really caught on. And frankly, some of the bands like Mayhem and all that stuff and their reputation and the things that their songs are about, I just don't see that doing me any good. I don't like the sound of it. First of all, and then also the lyrical content. And then there are bands like Cannibal Corpse or whatever, where it's just like, come on, man, this is way over the top for me. So I do draw a line in the sand with what I will consume. It's not just a free for all, and I don't like every band in the genre. I'm actually pretty particular about that. Mm-hmm. But
sure.
Yeah, I would say that there is some metal out there that's probably dangerous for a Christian person to consume at all.
Yeah.
And then there are other.
I would agree.
Yeah. So, but I just wanted to throw that out there.
And my personal line is like, if I'm reasonably certain that the evil things that are being sung about are like actually the singer's believing them, the artist is believing them, and wants to propagate these ideas, and they're not just treating it as like schlocky horror or something cartoonish. I just don't want to associate myself with that. I still don't think that like it would shake my faith, but I don't want to associate myself with that. It's too far to go. And then also, yeah, it's just as a matter of taste, stuff like Cannibal Corpse, where it's just not funny anymore. It's not clever. It's just stupid, and it's unhealthy probably to fixate on it with that much detail and everything.
Which I will also add to Cannibal Corpse. The guy's name's Corpse Grinder, right? The singer.
Yeah.
He is like, not just in all the meme posts that you've seen, he is unironically one of the sweetest men. He's just like a really, really good dude.
Which is great. You love to hear that.
Yeah, I mean, that guy's legit too. Like, his neck is huge, man. Like, he's just been banging his head for years, Yeah, I mean, So I mean, I don't know about the guy personally. I mean, I've met some of these metal musicians over the years. I'd go to concerts, and that's kind of the cool thing, especially about the kind of smaller bands. Like, you'd see them wandering around the parking lot or something during a show, and I got to meet a lot of these people, and they're just regular dudes, you know what I mean? Most of the time, they're not like out eating babies or whatever it is that they're writing their songs about.
Yeah.
I have my own line too, and I feel like sometimes I'm like my own hypocrite, especially with the band Merciful Fate, because there are things about that music, like certain songs, that I think are so badass and so cool. And that has like obviously impacted my writing. At the same time, it's like they are very explicitly singing about Satan, very explicit about it, being pro Satan. I'm just like I want to show this because there's some really cool music, but then all of the other stuff that's with it. So like that's kind of, and it's probably just because I'm a pussy and not standing on my principles, but there is almost a blurred line there. For me, at least with that band, because I do have such a strong connection to that actual music part of it.
Right.
But like, if it comes to other bands, like, nah, it's not even a question for me. Even my friends' music, if they hint at or talk about that, or talking about something like, oh, God's not real, God is dead. I'm just like, I'm not consuming it, guys. Sorry, I love you, but I'm not touching this. It's just this serves me in no way, you know.
But and I mean, the cool thing about metal is it's such a massive, expansive subgenre. There's almost always going to be like, you know, for every one album that you can't, you know, bring yourself on principle to listen to, there's going to be 10 more that sound just as sick, and like there's not really any problem with lyrics.
Well, for me personally, most of the bands that I enjoy, I mean, I'm old school, but I love like old DRI, even like Napalm Death up to a certain point. A lot of that's just kind of like warmed over left-wingerism, you know? And I mean, that's really what it is. And it's like, okay, well, I mean, this doesn't completely align with what I believe in a lot of ways. Sometimes it does, but it's not about Satan. Like Metallica never has songs about the devil. I mean, they get kind of close on maybe a few tracks.
The closest two things that they had were the God That Failed, which was like not, that wasn't literally trying to talk about how God doesn't exist. It was talking about how his parents were Christian scientists.
Yeah.
And they weren't treating themselves, or his mom wasn't treating herself for, I think it was cancer or some kind of like crazy disease.
Yeah, and she died really young. She died relatively young, and of something that might have been, you know, they may have been able to prolong her life, but she refused any kind of medical, help because of her religious background. So he's upset about that and writing a song about it. I'm not going to hold that against him. He's just telling it how he sees it.
It's a cry from the heart, right?
Mm-hmm.
I would agree. It's very honest. Yeah. It's definitely like resentful, but I mean, I wouldn't say that that's positive, but I have to give it positive for being very honest, you know?
Yeah.
Then the other song is Devil's Dance off of Reload, which is an awesome riff. Mm-hmm. But I don't think that that's inherently a celebration of. It's just talk like, okay, like Opeth has a whole album, Ghost Reveries, about a satanic possession through some like occult behavior. And again, I don't think it's a celebration of, because it's talking about from the person being possessed feeling horrified and messed up and how everything is bad. You know what I mean? Yeah. So like, just because you're talking about it, and they are shining a light on it, which I'm sure many exorcists would be like, this is not good to just like bandy about cavalierly. Okay, fair point. But it's definitely not celebrating it, in my opinion.
That's
you know what I mean?
Really good point and a really good distinction, because a lot of, I would say a lot of what you might find morally objectionable in lyrics is not actually, if you look at it, presenting it in like a positive light. And maybe they weren't thinking about this when they wrote it, but I mean, maybe they just wrote it because, you know, it's angry music and it's, you know, violent sounding lyrics. But take like Silent Scream by Slayer, you know, that's like about an abortion. It's horrifying. It's actually like telling the truth about what happens in an abortion. It's terrifying. It's not celebrating it at all. And it might be like an accidentally pro-life song if you really think about it.
I think that was very purposely a pro-life song. I think it was super purposely. Okay, now that we're on it again, let's talk about Slayer. Because Slayer to me, first of all, I'm not a fan of the music. Like, let's just set that out there. But I've seen some of the lyrics of multiple different songs. There are times when this stuff comes across as like very Christian, and then there's other times when this comes across as very satanic. And I think that's because they have multiple members of the bands contributing song ideas. So it's almost like it's a wash. I don't know. How do you guys interpret that?
It would be weird to be in that band, because Tom Araya, I've seen him in interviews where, you know, somebody asked him if he was religious, and he said he was Catholic. And, you know, I mean, but then he gets up and he sings these lyrics that sometimes you're like, oh, I think about it a lot more now. I definitely don't listen to that band as much as I used to. But one thing is that they have their first few albums, you know, they had that kind of cheesy satanic shtick to it. But they're pretty honest about that they did that to just get people's attention and rile people up. And it worked. I mean, during the 80s, that's pretty much all you had to do was put a pentagram on your album cover and you sold millions. And that's not a good reason to do it, but of course, and I used to follow that band around like they were the Grateful Dead or something. If they played a show anywhere, you know, near Southern California, I was there. And so I when I hear it now, there's a little bit of nostalgia. but I would have to admit to that being something of a guilty pleasure, and I don't listen to it nearly as much as I used to.
Yeah, I've kind of moved off them a little bit as well. You know, I'll throw on Rain and Blood every now and then, like the song, because like it goes hard, and I feel like those lyrics are more storytelling.
It does go hard.
Yeah, those lyrics are more storytelling than anything. I can't.
That and also, it's like, what a demonstration that they're trying to use a Christian mythos to tell a story, and they so horrifically don't understand Christianity.
They totally botch purgatory, man. Like
A lifeless object alive.
Yeah, like
Give me a break.
If you know, especially Catholic theology on that subject, and you listen to that song, you're like, what are these guys even talking about? Mm-hmm. So it's clear they don't understand the subject that they're writing about, or they're trying to tell some weird story and involve Christian themes because it's edgy, I guess. Right. I don't know.
But that actually,
it's edgy. Yeah,
that actually like gives you almost an insight into the writing process, that even they're kind of not paying a whole lot of attention to the lyrics. They're almost an afterthought, I feel like. So almost in the same way,
that's fair.
Almost in the same way that as a listener, the lyrics are an afterthought to me. It almost seems like sometimes the artists were treating it that way too. So that's another reason to kind of, that it doesn't bother me quite so much. But even then, like the song that I listened to less than I ever did is Angel of Death, because that is like actually horrifying. Yeah. And I don't know, that makes me genuinely uncomfortable now. Before, like when
I always thought Angel of Death was more of a Christian sided message, just talking about the apocalypse and end times. I mean, am I wrong on that?
Oh yeah, it's about Joseph
doctor.
Mengele and him doing experimenting.
Oh, I didn't know that. Okay.
Yeah,
right.
About Auschwitz.
Okay. Right. See, that's what I thought too, because Angel of Death, Exodus, Creeping Death, all that. But no, it's about a Nazi doctor, and they've said on the record, they don't endorse it or whatever, but it's still genuinely uncomfortable to listen to now, and like it actually detracts from the listening experience now that like I know the words he's saying and stuff. So it's not like a principled thing that has made me listen to it less. It's more like a comfort thing that I just can't like ignore it comfortably anymore, and that happens sometimes.
So like that goes back to what we were talking about with like Plato and Augustine. It's hitting your emotions, and that's affecting your soul. And you're not liking that check engine light comes up, and you're just like, okay, cutting this out.
Exactly.
Like,
although in this case, it's specifically lyrical, because again, those riffs go super hard, and I don't think they're doing anything to me. But it's
totally, yeah.
That song does have gnarly lyrics, but it's kind of like you said, he's almost acting as a reporter, not as a and it's definitely not glorifying it. They caught a lot of flack for that song when it came out. I remember that. I mean, it was all over the place because of the subject matter, and they would say in interviews, they're like, we're not glorifying this, we're just telling you about it.
I've done this in my own music. If you're trying to talk about something and like something evil, like an evil person, is it more impactful to paint a cartoonishly evil, unrealistic person, or is it more impactful to talk about the frame of mind, the perspective of the bad person doing the bad thing that they think they're completely justified in doing? Because like people don't walk around doing things that they believe are actually evil,
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So like just because it might sound like a celebration from the first person perspective, that doesn't inherently mean that the meta of that is actually celebrating evil. Does that make sense?
It does.
Mm-hmm. So we just had a beautiful conversation about metal between three Catholic guys. I'm assuming this probably doesn't happen super often in Catholic circles.
No. No, it doesn't. I mean, Thomas and I, but we work together.
Okay. That's cool. Does it ever feel weird trying to relate to other Catholics as a metalhead, like at your local parish or anything?
Honestly, for me, it doesn't really come up. That's not something that I lead with. I don't really talk to at church to people about music, and really even at work, I talk to Thomas about music all the time, but that's because he and I like some of the same bands. And so I don't really think about it that much. But in general, like when you start talking to other Catholics about just entertainment, any kind of entertainment in general, there's such a wide range of opinions on it that sort of like being at a party and avoiding talking about politics or something. I also probably don't really bring up the kind of music that I listen to most people. I just don't ever really feel the need to. So I don't know. Actually, no Catholic has ever made me feel weird or uncomfortable about it. They usually would ask me, like our conversation over the weekend at that video conference, there was people there who thought, you shouldn't listen to metal. And that's fine. I totally accept that from from them, and I wouldn't judge them on it. And in the same way, I've never had another Catholic. Well, there's been like maybe one or two, but I've been in the church for 20 years and doing this kind of work. I meet a lot of Catholics all over the place.
Lot longer than we have, for sure.
Yeah, I mean, and it, so I do run into people who've been critical, but that the number of them pales in comparison to the number of people who are like, oh, that's interesting. They don't really think anything about it one way or the other.
Brian Holdsworth comes to mind, who, by the way, really like his channel. I just want to make that also
he's a good
clear.
guy.
Yeah, shout out Brian.
He's had a few conversations around sacred music, and tangentially, some of the metal stuff comes up because he said he used to be a metalhead. He used to listen to this stuff, and he doesn't consume it anymore because like a lot of the arguments that I tossed out there. I've personally not seen any real pushback. I think every once in a while, people might be a little bit like, that's a little weird that you're Catholic but listen to metal music, but like it's never stopped me from feeling like I'm a part of the community, if that makes any sense.
Yeah.
But on a certain degree, because it is so closely tied to my identity, it does put a certain stop on some relationships developing further. Does that make sense? Because like that's a big part of who I am that I don't get to totally share. I don't know. Does that make sense?
Oh yeah.
Kinda, yeah. It's some people are just like, some people are never going to be just tuned on the wavelength of liking heavy metal, right?
Yeah.
So so if all they see from the outside is like, is the death and the Satan and stuff, they're never going to like understand like what it is about the music that makes you push through that and actually enjoy it. For my part, I've never felt like ostracized or anything. My parents were, understandably a little concerned when I first started showing interest. I can't fault them for
Mine
that.
too.
I used to. God bless them. They were patient with me. But yeah, it was totally reasonable. And I think as the years went on, they saw me still growing in my faith and taking things more seriously, not going down any destructive paths. And they just kind of got less and less worried. I think the thing that finally put them at ease was when they met John, and they were like, "Oh, here's a guy who's been a Catholic a lot longer and been a metalhead a lot longer." And I met
his mom. I met his mom at a conference, and she came up to me and just like point blank asked me. She's like, "I'm concerned about my son's taste in music. Should I be worried?" And I was like, "Well, if it makes you feel any better, he's like one of the smartest Catholics I know." And, I've been listening to this music since I was a kid, and it does not distract me from my goal, which is getting to heaven and getting my family to heaven and my friends to the extent that I can be an influence in that arena. The metal music is just something I do like when I'm driving to work or, for me, it's not the lifestyle that it was when I was a teenager. You know what I mean? Like at that point, it was just to fit in. It wasn't like, the kids weren't into, well, at least the kids I hung out with, they weren't into, Satan and all that stuff. They just liked the sound of the music and the stupid imagery that some bands have. Like it's like we were saying before, not all the bands have that. Some of them are like Metallica or Napalm Death or whatever it is. They talk about regular stuff that most people could, at least understand, sympathize with a little bit. Yeah.
Yeah. And then, so meeting my parents meeting John, I think, put them at ease pretty definitively. I went to a very small conservative Catholic college, Thomas Aquinas College, shout out. Most people there weren't into metal at all, but like, it also wasn't something that I led with. It wasn't an integral part of my personality as it might have been in high school. So, they just got to know me. Normal guy. And then, they'd see me in my, in my Metallica shirt, my Judas Priest shirt or whatever. And then eventually they realized like, oh, you like metal? And since they already knew me and they knew that I wasn't a psycho serial killer or anything, they were like, oh, I guess that's cool. All right. And eventually every now and then they'd ask me about it. They'd be a little curious, but I never felt like ostracized or attacked or anything for it. They were pretty cool about it. And even there at that tiny little college, there were like two guys who were into metal and were Catholic. So even from that point on, I was already meeting these people. They were finding me. Shout out Max Agros, he gave me my first guitar. So like it was. I've been kind of lucky almost to like almost always be landing in situations where I find people who are just as serious about their faith and also like metal. I'm finding them on the internet now too.
Yeah.
We're all congregating.
I was shocked how many we bumped into at the conference.
Yeah.
It was interesting at this workshop that you guys weren't at, but we were like introducing ourselves, and I introduced my channel and say like, yeah, I do commentary, I do metal stuff. And after I said the metal stuff, like 3 or 4 people in the room just go, yeah.
Nice.
Like, oh, okay. Like, I was not expecting that response. That's really cool.
Right.
You know?
That's how I knew. That's how I knew of you, was because I've been watching your channel for like at least a year, maybe more. I mean, I think you have good commentary, and you seem like a level-headed guy. I mean, I'm lucky to have gotten to know you better since then. But it's for me. I think metal is just. I don't want to say it's background noise, because I take it more seriously than that, and I really do enjoy certain bands. But like I said, I think that, you know, in Catholic circles, the people who don't like it or whatever, I don't give them a hard time. I'm not going to judge them on it. You know, even the people who've told me, oh, you shouldn't listen to that. Like, fair enough. You know what I mean? They're coming at it from their angle, and maybe, you know, to them it affects them badly. And you know, and they're just warning me, and that's fine. I'm not gonna give them a hard time for saying that to me, even if I disagree.
I guess last question, what would you say to a metalhead who's maybe interested in Catholicism or Christianity, but is a little concerned that they either won't fit in, or they're going to be judged, or maybe it's they would have to give up a part of themselves and feel like it's too square?
Well, it's kind of like what we've been talking about, is that, you know, that's sort of up to the individual to discern. But I would say, you know, as far as like coming into the church, I'm not going to drop any names, but I can tell you right now, there are some very prominent Catholic philosophers, theologians, people from, you know, all walks of life within the Catholic sphere that I have met who love metal. But they're kind of like me and Thomas, you know, there's a certain line that they're not going to cross, you know, but they still really enjoy the music, and they tell you the exact same thing that we were talking about before. It's all about the riff. It's all about the guitar riff.
How about you, Thomas?
I mean, being a cradle Catholic, I've never been in a convert's or revert's shoes, so I don't know exactly what the headspace might be like for that person. But the first thing I'd say is the most important thing is you have to be honest with yourself. You have to be examining yourself and seeing, is this negatively affecting me in any way? And if it is, you know, like Jesus says, cut it off and throw it away. The Christian life, the Catholic life is about sacrifice. It's about giving up what you love for something higher sometimes. A lot of the time.
Emptying worldly attachments so
Exactly.
Jesus can fill you with the Holy Spirit.
Exactly. So, you know, be prepared to do that if you honestly come to the decision that you think you need to do it. But you shouldn't be converting, you know, you shouldn't be converting to a religion because you think it may or may not be compatible with what you're already bringing in from your past life. You should be converting to it because you think it's true. And if you know...
That is such a good phrase. That was really a good call out.
Right.
The path of Catholic spirituality is not about confirmation bias. It's about transformation.
Yeah.
Right.
You know?
Well put. Yeah. So, you know, be prepared to give up that thing, because it's only going to get harder. It's only going to get harder. The path to perfection it's a lot of purification and purging what you used to love, but is now, you know, or still, and maybe still love, but is just not as good for you as maybe you thought it was.
I am really thankful that I don't fall into the category of having to decide whether or not that stuff gets in the way of me and the Lord, because it'd be a really sad day that I had to get rid of all my DRI records.
This has been an awesome conversation. Really, really appreciated this.
Yeah, thanks, man.
Is there anything you guys want to leave my audience with? Shout out to anything? Plug anything?
Your audience is hilarious, man. I love watching your live streams. Those guys are classic, dude.
I got some really fun fans on the live stream for
you
sure.
You do, man. They seem like a cool group.
Don't take anything we said, at least as relates to metal specifically, as like, you know, Catholic theology or official church teaching. I mean, at the end of the day, the church hasn't, like, to my knowledge, made any statement on, you know, whether listening to X genre of music is sinful or not. So, you know,
I don't think they've done that for literally any genre of music.
Right,
like,
right, exactly. Which leaves it up to theological opinion, which carries some weight, of course.
Yes.
But as far as what we've said, like, we work at Catholic Answers, we haven't given the Catholic answer on anything we've said tonight. We've given our opinions as like three dudes who listen to metal and love Jesus.
Yeah, and there are people on the other end of this who make really good arguments, and you know,
Yeah.
anybody out there discerning that would do well to hear the other side out as also.
Okay, cool. Thank you guys again.
Thank you, man. This was fun.
Yeah, this was super awesome, man.
Love you all. Bye.
Likewise.
Yep.
See you, man.